Hi, Dina.
Hello. Have a couple folks joining. Thanks everyone for joining the Content Forum chat today. Thought it was a good opportunity to take advantage of the article that was recently published by ASAE on content strategy. And honestly, just have a chance to get together and talk content strategy. So thanks everyone for joining.
Well, thanks for
I'm going
hosting.
to go ahead and share my screen that just has a couple things from the article on it. And just for other folks listening later, the article was called Embrace Content Strategy for Better Organizational Outcomes, which I think we all agree could be a mantra for the work that we do.
Yeah, no kidding.
I feel like the really cool thing about the article was that it was all based on research that the ASAE Foundation had done. And the interesting findings that I saw from the Impact Everyday study that they did as part of their centennial work last year, which I'm showing the percentages here from the respondents, how many things that were on here were directly related to content.
Yeah, no kidding.
In the work that you all
No,
have
I mean,
done,
this is why I always say that content is the way that our work is manifested in the world, because content is what organizations, what associations do to be valuable, to show their value.
One area that isn't listed here, but that I think underlies a lot of the value of content is enabling better decisions and anticipating the future, because so much of the content that associations produce is meant for very practical purposes to improve decisions and to build more capacity for decision making.
yeah, I think that's a great point, Anne. Do you have an example of that in the work that you've done with the organizations that you've been with that kind of exemplify that?
Well, one that focused specifically on helping to anticipate the future was at the National YMCA headquarters, where the trends report that we did was consistently voted by the local YMCAs to be the most valuable publication from the national office. Once it was revamped to include tools about how to apply the information so that it wasn't just interesting content, but immediately actionable. And I'm sure everybody here has stories about how they've done much the same with building decision and foresight capabilities with content.
Right.
Yeah, that's such a great point. Decision and what was the other one you said?
Foresight capabilities.
Yes.
Foresight. Yeah, absolutely.
Versus
Do
just
any other?
So this speaks to a client I'm working with right now who publishes a lot of information that's kind of academic and scientific, and they don't take it to that step.
Yeah, one of the ones that jumped out at me on the trusted source, and just thinking about one example from ASM.org, Courtney Ryers is on the ASA Communication Professional Advisory Council with me. And one thing they did with COVID in the last year is they created a COVID registry on their website where they had vetted journal content and other research-based content that they promoted under their umbrella as a way to let them become obviously a trusted source for that information when so much was new to most people, not to them because they were microbiologists, but being able to explain a very complex subject under a respected umbrella of the research that they had already done.
Yeah, and it seems like COVID is the first pandemic where the problem is as much too much content than too little, because there's no way that anybody could sort through and vet all of the material by themselves. So that became a new role as a kind of content filter and evaluator.
Well, not only that, what is our association's unique pieces of the body of content that people need to hear from us versus repeating what we already hear in the news or through a million other sources?
Right. Yeah, I think that's the curation really comes. I'm sorry, Sarah, go ahead.
I was just going to say the uniqueness of COVID was in the speed with which a lot of associations had to develop that content that they did create originally, that they're used to having a slower pace with that. And it had to be done immediately. That was the need. And then it had to be evolved very quickly as new information came up. I mean, the speed with which COVID information was changing is not what associations were used to at all. I mean, they're used to planning things on more of a long-term basis. So there were definitely some new skills that came into being. Yeah, we saw a lot of that.
Yeah, I think associations are afraid of speed. Yes. Because they want to get it right. They want to be the authoritative source. And yes. Back and forth between the staff and the membership or the volunteer committees always, of course, complicates everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And I think they also have the perception and accurate perception that when they get content right, nobody really notices, but if they get it wrong, it's a disaster.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, nobody notices when everything's going okay. It's only when there's those. Yeah, the interesting point, Sarah, that you said about the speed, and I'm kind of anxious to see how it plays out, both with the content that you were talking about, the practical or informational content about COVID, but honestly, from the content strategy side too, the part that I find fascinating is the speed at which people had to flip the delivery of their content with events, right? So if we look at those two as kind of parallel paths, is there going to be any longer term governance changes for content in just kind of the day-to-day production and also in the educational delivery that might be kind of a silver lining of having to go through the pandemic and all the things that made happen to organizations?
I think that it does really blur the distinction. Having virtual events means, like, what's the difference between an online session held at a conference and a webinar? They are now exactly the same thing. And yet they're very often planned by different groups, have different parameters or different ideas of what success looks like. And so having a virtual event really means that associations need to go back to the drawing board and really give some good kind of fresh thought to what exactly are we creating, and what does the format mean or need, and what does success look like?
Right.
At the Hospital Association, I noticed that there seemed to be a lot more interest in gathering information and content from other resources and organizations rather than creating our own consistently. And I think a lot of associations kind of flip between the not invented here, it can't be valuable, and the not and invented by somebody with a fancy name, it must be incredibly valuable. And there might be a rebalancing of internal and external creation and curation and collaboration based on the changes that we saw. What do you think?
Yeah, very, very much so. I think one of the ways that I've tried to start approaching it is more asking the associations I work with, what content are you in a unique position to create that is different than all of those other sources? You know, what voice do you have that those other experts don't? All of you are experts, but how is your perspective different, and what can you lend to the conversation? You don't have to say the same thing that they did. You can have a mix of curated content from valuable sources, as well as your own unique content. And I think what you can help do from another perspective is help your members identify which sources, in addition to you as an association, are trustworthy, and you know, which ones are going to give you really well-researched information, and which ones are just spreading rumors. You know, you can help make that distinction of, if my association is saying that they go to this location to find information, that must be a good source because they trust it. So that trust will carry on and help people better identify those, because that's a huge struggle for people today, is knowing which sources should be trusted. So if you can help identify that in the larger industry, that's also a really valuable tool for your members.
Yeah. Last year, right before the pandemic, I launched a white paper that I created with Elizabeth Engel on content curation as a topic. And so I think that baseline level of the association being the trusted filter is the table stakes. Where I think that the association has the most opportunity is to not be Google. Remember, members can find anything anywhere now. So being the gatekeeper itself isn't enough. Where really the association has an opportunity is to add its own analysis, to say, this is why we're sharing this with you, and here's what the takeaways are. That's a unique kind of interpretation, or again, like a filter of a filter for the members' specific needs. So we don't need to repeat what the CDC says, but what do people in our profession need to understand about what the CDC says? Because the CDC's information is available through its own website, through news outlets, through a million different sources. But why are you sharing this particular thing from the CDC with me today?
Right.
Not just filtering it, but adding that value that you're talking about through the content.
Yeah, so I created sort of a maturity ladder, and that analysis is at the top of the ladder.
Yeah, I think that wraps back nicely into what you were saying about the WISE research, right? I think that kind of addresses these bullets near the bottom here on these findings from the Impact Everyday study. You know, does the association or organization already have standards and guidelines in place around that particular topic that they can repurpose and kind of add to the conversation? Or do they have their own research that they've conducted that they can relate to the broader issue or content that's being put out there, as Hillary said, in the public domain? Make it relatable. That kind of is a good segue into the other research piece that Jenny cited in the article. which was the Foresight Works information, and particularly in the content area, the shifting environment for content report that came out of there. And there were 3 of many bullets that they're in that research section, where they talked about driving member value, which I think we alluded to earlier. How are you demonstrating that member value in the content that you're putting out there? The personalizing, which we haven't talked about yet, but we did start to touch on the preparing content for reuse. How are you thinking about the content that you're creating now with the eye on the future that it might have to be used in different formats or different situations later? And how, as content strategists, can we do that better for organizations?
Does anybody have a handle on organizations that are doing a really good job with the personalization? It seems as though a lot of the personalization that I've seen at associations is either very broad and kind of obvious, or so niche that it doesn't quite get there. Is this something you've seen done really well?
I think that it's a little hard to know, right? Because if information is personalized to you, how do you know what you're not getting? And that's my big personal question with like the RASA e-newsletters. At one point I asked in one of the Collaborate groups, what did you see in your RASA e-newsletter? And everybody I talked to at least said they were getting the same stuff I am. And so then, is it really personalized, or is it the illusion of personalization? So I don't really know, although like the anecdotal reports are that associations who use that tool are happy with it, but I don't know what the back end looks like. I don't know what the considered possible things in a given newsletter from ASAE or OrgSource or whoever I get those newsletters from. What was the universe of stuff I didn't get? And so it's very, very hard to know.
Yeah, and the one example I would say is I heard from Matt, another colleague on the Communications Council, that it kind of, I think he just wrote an article. I'll share it as a follow-up with you guys in associations now, but he was talking about the launch of their communities in the past year. So I think it's Hillary, you were speaking specifically to newsletter personalization.
Yeah.
They took the tact with their content strategy that they were going to use their communities to kind of personalize the content, so people could choose which communities to belong to, and then they were going to focus their delivery mechanism of the content to those kind of audience-defined groups or interest-defined groups within the community. So that was, I thought, just a different approach than what we've typically been hearing about.
Yeah, that's kind of the low-tech approach.
Yeah, exactly. It's an entry point almost to see how that would work.
Right. I mean, it comes down to the basic questions of who's your audience and what's your goal.
Right.
So personalization really means that you know who the audience is and you know what they're interested in, because you ideally have collected that information and have a good taxonomy so that you can tag everything about that topic to them. And taxonomy is such a unsexy effort, but a really crucial underpinning to be able to personalize.
Oh, yeah.
Right. The cool thing about Matt, I did one of the Content Forum member profile stories on him last year, and he came out of the library science field. So I think taxonomy is something of high interest for him versus maybe some other people. Like you said, not quite a sexy topic for everyone, but he was into it.
Yeah, and also coming from that library science background, it really is a combination of so many disciplines, including simply behavioral science, was understanding how people think about content and how they approach it is deeply rooted in how you're going to build your taxonomy. It's not just, let's find the keywords that apply, throw them at the wall and see what fits.
Right.
Sarah,
do you have any
experience putting that
comments
into
on-
place? Yeah,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, say that again, Hillary.
I was just asking Ann whether she has experience putting that into place and adding the behavioral science layer on top of the kind of topic analysis.
At the AHA, we did a full revamp of the taxonomy, which previously had about 12 keywords, to something much more comprehensive. And a lot of it was following people's tracks through the website using Google Analytics and understanding if somebody comes in looking for X, what else are they looking for? And where should that be a related term? Where should it be a parent or a child term? And also trying to distinguish when somebody came to the site with 3 or 4 different tasks in mind versus one task and refining it.
Interesting. That's really specific and intense. That's a great investment. Did you see any change in measurable performance of the content after you did that work?
Absolutely, but the change was so huge, going from a very broad and essentially non-personalizable taxonomy to one that allowed for much more specificity. It was hard to tell what the exact impact was, but content searches went way down, which was a good sign, while content time on page went way up, which again, a very good sign.
Great. Sarah, any of those 3 bullets that we have on the shifting environment for content spark any ideas in you of work that you've done with organizations, examples you want to share?
I'm trying to think of a specific example. What's not coming to mind, but that last bullet really stands out to me as an area where a lot of associations could use some improvement in the planning ahead to reuse the content. They create the content and then the repurposing of it in different platforms, at least from my experience, which may actually still be the norm, feels a little disjointed in when it gets posted on social media, when it maybe gets shortened and posted in a different place, a digital versus print, and how do you look at 2 different ways of repurposing that same content.
Right.
So that's an area where we're trying to, because we work with a lot of smaller state groups and small staff groups, that's just, that level of planning is just not something that's usually top of mind, or not something that they always have the time to be able to prioritize, because there are just so many other competing fires that have to be dealt with immediately. So to sit down and plan out an individual piece of content and how it's going to be repurposed is definitely a challenge, because it does take some planning and some time management. So it's a pain point, I know, but it feels so important to try to move forward on that last piece, just because that one piece of content that an association really has put work into could get so much more, longevity out of it by doing that last piece.
Yeah, that reminded me of Karen McGrath's quote that always comes to mind, that truncation is not a strategy, right? I mean, there are many memes that kind of grew out of that.
Emails, subject lines, and titles referred to and related links and all that.
Yep.
Right.
cut off in like a
Absolutely.
very not advantageous way.
Right. Well, as we're nearing the top of the hour, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention one of my favorite ASA Foundation research projects, which I know Hillary shares that opinion, the Association Content Strategies for a Changing World study. Always look for opportunities to promote that. Jenny cited a couple of the tactical discussions that were highlighted in that report. But again, I'm just really excited to see the foundation and ASAE continually emphasizing content and content strategy as an underlying piece of importance in association management.
Well, on the chapter, right? We were honored to write the chapter. So there's now a chapter on content strategy in the latest textbook, you know, of professional practices and association management, which is great.
Yeah.
And I'm really hoping that between the study and the chapter, people will get it. Associations will really get it that they need to build this into their operations.
Right.
I have the old version of the book, and now I really want the new one just for that chapter.
I'm waiting for my copy as well. I haven't gotten it either.
I'm like,
Yeah,
I
I'm
want to take it
excited.
just for that. That's fine.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I think the printed version's coming out next month, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Okay, does
also
anybody
wanted to give a
have any
team
comments?
plug for the survey, which if you haven't taken it, here's a link.
Oh, right.
It's
Yeah.
so about 6 years ago, I did a big survey of content strategists to learn where they work, what they do. So I took one of the core questions that we had in the study the survey that we did as part of the ASAE study, and I included that in this survey to really get a clearer sense of the work that various content strategists do in various circumstances. And I don't have access to that Qualtrics, so I haven't gotten a sneak peek of the results yet, but we definitely want more responses. So please take it if you haven't, please share it with other people. It's going to be open till the end of the month. And I'm really eager to start seeing the data from there and learn where we are, what we do, what environments we work in, all of that, what we earn. And that's good ammunition for all of us. It's good for job
Right.
descriptions. It's good for power, you know, to know what to ask for. And it has so many good implications in terms of being the foundation for better education at universities and what content strategy is and that kind of thing.
Right. Excellent. Well, great. Well, I thank you all again for taking time out today to chat, and we'll see you on Content Forum. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks for organizing this, Dina.
Bye-bye. Okay. Talk soon. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.